Happy as a butter clam when tides are high I sing a grateful ode to Puget Sound, the land of everything. I love it from Tulalip, from Puyallup, Squim and Pished, and to the Dosey Wallops where so many times I've fished.
What you've just seen is either the only films taken so far of a Sasquatch or a deliberate hoax perpetrated on the public. It all depends on your point of view. Webster's dictionary defines a syndrome as a group of signs or symptoms that occur together and characterize a disease. In short, the cause itself remains a mystery. This week, along with John Green, whose attempts to unravel the mystery have resulted in numerous books on the subject, we explore the Sasquatch syndrome, a combination of signs and symptoms for which there is still no answer, the biological question mark known as Bigfoot.
Investigation of this, it's certainly not an explanation without problems, but the simplest explanation is that there is indeed a creature such as these people see, and it makes these tracks. Okay, well, if you consider only that, your reaction will probably be, well, that's nonsense, that couldn't be so. All right, but what are your alternatives? And the only one that has ever been raised that has any substance at all is that the tracks are the result of a human hoax. And certainly this is...
In other words, if somebody is trying to pull something over on who or what,
I mean, you can say some of them are mistaken and some of them are made up and some of them are hallucinations or what all, but it's you really can't write them all off. So that you've got to say that if you do not have such an animal, then you have not just one person, but a continuing group of people who are going to great trouble and expense to perpetuate this hoax. And they must be dressing up and masquerading to some extent, as well as manufacturing footprints. Well, that's not impossible. When people do some very queer things, but there's no evidence for it. In all this time, we've come up with all the evidence that you could ask for that there is a creature other than the creature itself.
John Green's research and writings on the subject have encompassed the better part of 20 years. For Green, the Sasquatch exists, despite the fact that he himself has never seen one. A calm, somewhat dispassionate background, the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, newspapers in Toronto, Victoria, Vancouver, BC, publisher of a weekly newspaper near Harrison Hot Springs, where he now resides with his wife and family, and where he has devoted a large portion of his time and resources in attempting to obtain a thorough scientific investigation into the subject, and assembling what is certainly one of the largest collections of Bigfoot material available to date. The most conspicuous, of course, being the tracks themselves. Photographed, measured, tested for compression, and preserved in plaster, They represent a significant sample of thousands of tracks that have been found scattered over 500,000 square miles in area and 1,000 miles in length. These, together with reports of sightings and eyewitness accounts of encounters with the animal in question, help to trace the outline, at least, of the phenomenon in which he has played so major a role. First, as a skeptical reporter, and eventually as a dedicated researcher whose refusal to accept the easy explanation of lies, bears, and hallucinations led to the conviction he holds today. Drawing from hundreds of reports, a number of which he has investigated personally, his up-to-date factual publications have helped greatly to publicize the Sasquatch problem. Yet despite the mass of reports, they represent only a small fraction of the populace, and lacking physical evidence, the scientific community remains largely aloof. In the words of Dr. Richard Doherty, head of Washington State University's Department of Physical Anthropology, evidence is a skeletal remains of the animal, and without that, there is no Sasquatch.
Actually, we're, as a nation, rather interested in science fiction, and perhaps that's one of the charms of the field of anthropology, that we can investigate things such as the reports that have occurred over the years of such things as the lost continent of Mu and Atlantis and this kind of mythology. Right at the moment, there's a popular book on chariots of the gods. It'll sell millions of copies, absolutely without scientific fact. And yet, the interest in science fiction is still there. People can look for Sasquatches, they can look for the Yeti or the abominable snowman. I think they could just as profitably spend their time out looking for trolls under bridges or leprechauns in the forest.
Lacking a forest, we settled for an alpine thicket across from Boulder Creek Glacier on the south side of Washington's Mount Baker, whose volcanic proclivities have recently made this area accessible only for a short visit due to possible mudslides. It was here that Rod Puller had found a track following an experience with what he claims was a Sasquatch. Reenacting the possible route of the animal, as it moved down the rocky stream bed, losing its balance momentarily, it had placed one foot on a soft, grassy spot, recovered, and went on, leaving the outlines of a print which Rod later had cast in cement. Whatever it was, it left minimal evidence of its presence. The encounter had taken place in heavy brush, and other than a series of high-pitched screams and an overwhelming stench, the animal had failed to reveal itself. According to Rod, however, who has had considerable experience as an outdoorsman and hunter, what he had heard was unlike anything he had ever heard before. And what he had seen imprinted on the ground next to the stream bed was definitely not the track of a bear. Whatever credibility one may allow to the witness or the animal in question, there's no doubt that the tracks do exist. Either they are made by men or they are made by a very large creature. Something in western North America is responsible for the enormous human-like tracks, which at this point in time is the only tangible evidence that can be subjected to close scientific scrutiny. A Sasquatch enthusiast, even before he acquired his doctorate in physical anthropology, Dr. Grover Kranz of Washington State University has not allowed his new status to change his attitude.
These are not necessarily convincing in themselves just because they're giant feet, but they show characteristics that are not just giant human footprints, but are anatomically designed for extremely heavy body weight. And I don't think anyone could have faked those things. First is the arch. Quite an indentation in the arch in the human foot, and it's not in the Sasquatch, which follows automatically from the great weight. The heel, the human foot, although it's almost as long, its heel is much narrower than the Sasquatch. Again, that's a measure of the weight-carrying capacity of the foot. Then on the toes, the different sizes of toes, the big toe is biggest in the Sasquatch, but then they decline only slightly as you go down the line. But in the human, they decline very abruptly. The second toe is very tiny compared to the first. And these are not the sort of characteristics I would expect in someone faking a foot. He would just turn his foot upside down and carve a model of his own foot, and he wouldn't get these characteristics.
There is no Sasquatch.
Kranz does not speak for a large percentage of the scientific community.
There's absolutely no evidence of their existence. Nothing that I would accept as evidence. And on the contrary, there's abundant evidence that there could be no such thing. There's no skeletal remains, no in-focus photographs, series of reported sightings, footprints that could have been made by anybody. That isn't evidence.
Along with size, it would also be necessary to explain the amount of compression. The question arises, could the tracks be made by an individual capable of carrying a large amount of weight?
He would be, okay, if he's got 100 pounds extra on him, he's weighing 300 pounds. He's putting that weight on a giant fake foot that's going to be 3 times as large as the surface area of his foot. So he's going to be putting down much less weight per square inch, and it will be, in effect, a snowshoeing across the surface of the ground. But these imprints, as I've seen them, are impressed more deeply than a human would impress with an ordinary body weight. So you can't do it just putting a little weight on your back. If you're a 200-pound man, you've got to put something like 500 or 600 pounds on your back to make these imprints. And I don't know anyone who can walk around with 500 pounds on his weight and take 4-foot strides, step over barbed wire fences 44 inches, and climb up and down hills. I'm afraid that's out of the question.
And here you have a creature that is obviously totally in command of the situation physically. It's too big for anything to bother it. It can eat just about anything. It's got a good fur coat, and quite possibly can even sleep in the cold weather. It doesn't have to be around. And you know, there's simply nothing there to put any pressure on this thing to develop, to survive by its wit.
Yeah.
And just be like the gorilla, which is a tremendously intelligent animal, but lives the life of a cow.
Yes.
And this idea that this is some kind of subhuman or semi-human, or some people even think they're superior to humans, you know, the idyllic forest life kind of a thing. There's nothing going for it. There are people that claim to know a lot about Sasquatches, that claim that they're human, but either they're the kind of people who just have a belief and everything has to fit it, or else they're saying this because it's the popular thing to say.
In filing his report of a Sasquatch sighting, Mark Pittenger became one of a growing number of public officials whose credibility has been put to the test. As a trooper with the Washington State Patrol, it can be assumed, however, that he's had practice in making precise observations and in keeping his wits about him when confronted with the unexpected.
Today was approximately the first week of August, 1972. It was parked along the shoulder, approximately back where you're standing, back a ways. And I had my amber lights on to the rear, and I had my high beams on to the front. I was catching up on some paperwork in my vehicle. The car went by going from east to, and as soon as the car went over the hill crest, approximately where the van is going eastbound now, I caught a movement out, at which time I looked up, and the hill, traveling along in here, took one step from the shoulder to approximately the center line, another step from the center line approximately to anything like that. It just walked diagonally on 2 legs up to the top of the hill.
In the minds of most serious investigators, the one vital link in the chain of evidence supporting the existence of Bigfoot is a 1967 Bluff Creek footage filmed by Roger Patterson. Opinion is divided. The question, of course, is it real?
I'm satisfied that it is. It shows too many things that I don't think Patterson could have faked. With his abilities, knowledge, background, he could not have done it.
We asked Dr. Kranz what evidence he had to support his theory
Okay, the footprints that went along with it were consistent with the movie, and he wouldn't have had the ability to fake a number of the details on the footprints. He wouldn't have known what to fake. And on the creature itself, although it doesn't show in this frame, the shoulders are so wide that no human could be wearing that monkey suit with his arms in the arms of the image. He would have to have his arms folded on his chest, and the arms of the creature would have to be hanging loose. Yet those arms in the movie are moving, and you can see the elbow and wrist move. So unless someone had a $1 million gadget with wires and controls and everything, I don't see any way that could have been faked. It's just simply too big for somebody to be inside that suit.
How big would you say?
Well, that's been established for sure, with another movie having been made right superimposed at the same place with a known subject. And the creature stands a little bit over 6.5 feet, but if it were standing up perfectly straight, which it's not, it would be just about 7 feet tall. And the presumed weight from several different lines of evidence would be about 500 pounds. So it's a fairly respectable animal. This being a very rare animal, mainly nocturnal, quite a surprise to everyone who encounters it, and probably big enough to take an awful lot of gunfire, I'm not at all surprised that there are no remains, no dead ones that have been brought in.
No, I forgot I had a weapon. I had a shotgun, that was accessible to me, plus my service revolver. The only thing was, your mind is saying it isn't there, but you're seeing this thing. And the only thing you can really think of is to put more light on it, so that you can see better, to more or less confirm it for yourself. You're not really fearful of it. You're, for lack of a better phrase, there's a lot of respect, and you're somewhat awed when you see something like that, because here's something that, you've been told is out there, and you've never seen, and you finally see it.
The scientific community should not be placed in a position of having to say to defend ourselves against the suggestion there are Sasquatches. The people who think that there are Sasquatches have the responsibility of proving the fact, and so far they haven't. In fact, I don't think it's even a reasonable possibility. Hard evidence to me is the existence of skeletal material of the creature, if it existed. There are loggers, people working in the woods all the time. There are tens of thousands of hunters combing the brush. There are people hunting bears with dogs. There are, the people who suggest that there are remote recesses in the woods that nobody gets to it's just fallacious. The timber cruisers, there's people out there all the time. These animals, if they existed, obviously would have to die. If they died, someone should come up with some peculiar skeletal features. Skeletal materials, that is, skulls, long bones, ribs, whatever. These have never turned up. There's absolutely no hard evidence of the existence of these animals.
That's the only reason that there's any mystery to this at all, is that nothing physical has been found. If it ever had been, we wouldn't be sitting here. There would just be another animal there that we would know about, and that'd be that. I'm convinced. It's not a matter of faith, it's a matter of evidence. I've got no commitment to an animal. I'm not in that field at all. I'm a newspaper man. All I was dealing with was something interesting. Mm-hmm. There's a phenomenon that attracted my attention, and I started investigating.
One of the most frustrating things must be to actually see one.
Yeah, I'm just as glad I haven't.
Then in that case, you have your own visual evidence that such a thing exists.
Yeah, and then you can't stand back and take an impartial
there's no way.
At all. You're stuck.
You know that such a thing exists.
You're there trying to convince people that you're telling the truth and really saw what you see. So, and this is very hard on a lot of people.
It would be.
They're accustomed to having their word accepted,
sure.
And all of a sudden it just doesn't work anymore, and it's a real shock to them.
It may even reach a stage where you're wondering if you had actually seen something or not, if your mind had played tricks on you.
I'm sure that a lot of people, the mind tidies this away after a while.
Yeah, it's just too hard to accept.
Yeah, that's one of the first things I learned. I've probably learned more psychology than zoology over the years.
Is that right?
Is that there is a mechanism in the mind that tidies things up. I would get, away from this for a month or so. Nothing would bring it to my mind at all. And the next time that the subject would be under consideration, I would realize that I had acquired an emotional attitude that it had all been explained. And I would have to go back over it and determine that it hadn't been explained. Yeah.
There's no way to me it's a myth. To me, I swear to everything that I hold sacred that yes, indeed, there is a Sasquatch. You take it for what it's worth. Some people laugh, some people listen. You get in a tight group of those who believe. It's just like a religion. If I were to say to you, prove to me today that God is here, and you'd have a heck of a time doing it, And likewise, you come to me and say, well, prove to me beyond a reasonable doubt that there's a Sasquatch. I can't. There's a little bit of faith involved in it, belief. You either believe it or you don't. The ones that have been in it for years, like John Green, 20, 25 years he's been in it, he's never seen one. But he's got physical evidence like you wouldn't believe, that these things exist. Something keeps that man going. I'm sure you've met the individual and you know that he's a sincere individual. Why would these types of people be out in the brush, away from their family, enduring hardships, ridicule, what have you, if there isn't something out here? To me, beyond a reasonable doubt, there is a Sasquatch. I call it Sasquatch for lack of a better name. Someday it'll be named.
Having eliminated the impossible, Sherlock Holmes once said, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Yet for John Green and a growing number who continued to raise the question, credibility is still an elusive target. And the answer is yet to be found.
Whichever side of the fence you fall on, the Sasquatch syndrome seems destined to occupy a growing role in our culture. It's a subject of conjecture, certainly, and controversy, and one of the most intriguing mysteries of our time. Next week, another exciting true life adventure. I hope you'll join us. Till then, this is Don McCune reminding you that it's all on Exploration Northwest.
Happy as a butter clam when tides are high I sing a grateful ode to Puget Sound, the land of everything. I love it from Tulalip, from Puyallup, Squim and Pish, and to the Dosey Wallops where so many times I've fished.
I was supposed to have some brown root today.
Yep.
Brennan to the Bogoshiel, from Lemmy to Lapush, and from the lordly Salda to the lovely Dutta Bush, from Samish to Sammamish, from Suquamish to Quilcene. The climate is so friendly, it's a land that's evergreen. Stillicum, where spouts the gooey duck, singing Stillaguamish and swirling skookum chuck, Moke Lips and Copalis, where the razor clams abound. A little bit of heaven is a shack on Puget Sound. There's peace on the Skokomish, on the Queets and on the Hoe. There's calm on the Nisqually, born of ageless ice and snow. A land that nature loves so much, she stays the whole year round. I'd trade a royal palace for a shack on Puget Sound.
Back in the fall of '58, Harrison Hot Springs was hot with debate. Yeah, Sasquatch, you see, was back on the scene. And it caught the attention of John Green. The more he heard, well, the more it rang true. With each story he investigated, his interest grew. The evidence was compelling up on Ruby Creek. He knew something was out there and he was determined to seek. He came to California when he saw Jerry Crew holding that foot cast, and then he just knew that finding this creature was becoming his mission. Got Tom Slick to fund a Bigfoot expedition. He was out seeking Sasquatch, wasn't seeking no glory. He was the one documenting the story, and who was always one of the first on the scene. The Sasquatch had been there. So had John Green. So had John Green. Well, throughout the 60s, he stayed on the track, collecting reports and sorting the facts. His database of sightings and his evidence increased. He could never catch a glimpse of the beast. He was there when they screened that film from Bluff Creek. He'd been down there that summer, found tracks on Onion Peak. It seemed the answer to this riddle was so close, yet so fleeting, like the creature itself, but John was never retreating. He was out seeking Sasquatch, wasn't seeking no glory. He was the one documenting the story, and who was always one of the first on the scene. If a Sasquatch had been there, so had John Green. So had John Green. Published some books to disperse what he'd learned, reputation for thoroughness and logic he'd earned. He wanted science to address this mystery, but much to his dismay, this was never to be. To this day, he's still looking and he's offering advice. His passion to resolve this has become his vice. He has no regrets, he'd like only to be there when we finally solve this mystery. He was out seeking Sasquatch, wasn't seeking no glory, investigating and documenting the story, and who was always one of the first on the scene. If a Sasquatch had been there, so had John Green. So had John Green. so hit John Green. Well, back in the fall of '58, Harrison Hot Springs was hot with debate. Yeah, Sasquatch, you see, was back on the scene. And it caught the attention of John Green. The more he heard, well, the more it rang true. With each story investigated, his interest grew. The evidence was compelling up on Ruby Creek. He knew something was out there and he was determined to see. Came to California when he saw Jerry Crew holding that foot cast, and then he just knew that finding this creature was becoming his mission. Got Tom Slick to fund a Bigfoot expedition. He was out seeking Sasquatch, wasn't seeking no glory. He was the one documenting the story, and who was always one of the first on the scene. The Sasquatch had been there. So had John Green. So hit John Green. Well, throughout the '60s, he stayed on the track, collecting reports and sorting the facts. His database of sightings and his evidence increased. He could never catch a glimpse of the beast. He was there when they screened that film from Bluff Creek. He'd been down there that summer, found tracks on Onion Peak. It seemed the answer to this riddle was so close, yet so fleeting, like the creature itself, but John was never retreating. He was out seeking Sasquatch, wasn't seeking no glory. He was the one documenting the story, and who was always one of the first on the scene if a Sasquatch had been there. So had John Green. So had John Green. Published some books to disperse what he'd learned, reputation for thoroughness and logic he'd earned. He wanted science to address this mystery, but much to his dismay, this was never to be. To this day, he's still looking and he's offering advice. His passion to resolve this has become his vice. He has no regrets, he'd like only to be there when we finally solve this mystery. 'Cause he was out seeking Sasquatch, wasn't seeking no glory, investigating and documenting the story, and who was always one of the first on the scene if a Sasquatch had been there. So hit John Green. So hit John Green. So hit John Green.